Hi, friends. Welcome. Happy post-Thanksgiving here in the US. I'm glad you're here. It's Black Friday. Thanks for spending a little bit of your Black Friday with me. You could go do the shopping things later. This is going to be a rip-roaring session. I'm going to share some new content today, which I'm excited to do. Today, we're going to talk about some qualities that colleges look for in college applications. And I'll give a little bit of context before we get into that, where these qualities even came from. And then I want to dive into a specific application so you can see what these look like in the wild, as it were. What do these actually look like in terms of a college application that was submitted a few years ago? Successfully, the student got into where they applied early. And then I want to tell you about this awesome boot camp that starts tomorrow. So if you're still working on applications, even if you're just getting started, it's totally fine. Um, and I'm going to give away 5 free spots in that boot camp. And the way that I'm going to give away those spots is I'm going to do it via this Google form that Jasmine's going to share in the chat. So if you fill out the Google form, which one lets me know that you're here and who you are, and two is going to allow you to be entered to get those free spots. So stay tuned. It's going to appear in the chat here in just a minute. And then I'm going to share some tips for how do you make the most before of this month before regular decision deadlines come up. We've also got a lot of, because it's the holiday season, we're doing lots of giveaways. So I'll mention this at the end as well. But just so you know, we've got this boot camp coming up. We're doing a little 10% off thing with the code thanks, which I'll put this in the chat. But if you enter the code thanks, all caps, THANKS, you'll get 10% off the boot camp. And then we also have this cool thing called complete application review, which we'll put the link into in the chat as well. That's an opportunity to get your whole application reviewed if you like. And there's $100 off that with the code that we'll put in the chat here. And then we also do one-on-one support. Some of you are like, I'd like more help on my essays. We got you, fam. And you can get $350 off any package with the code thanks. So we'll put that in the chat as well. I'll review those later. But for now, let's get into the stuff. What are colleges even looking for? And how the heck do I know what colleges are looking for? Well, I'll tell you. Earlier this year, I spent some time with Tom Campbell, who's our community manager here, and we basically looked at 100 different college websites and we did an analysis of what are the qualities that they say that they're looking for. So for example, if you Google Caltech, what we look for, there are specific things that they're looking for, and it's different from other schools slightly. But we kind of looked at the Venn diagram overlap of what are these colleges saying that they're looking for, and we came up with what we're calling our college admission nutrients. Nutrients in the sense of like, we believe these are some of the things that create a healthy, as it were, college application. And we boiled it down to 5 qualities, 5 nutrients, and here's what they are. These are our college admission nutrients. So the first one is intellectual curiosity. And if you are a counselor, you probably are blue in the face from talking about students showing this in their applications. We call this unapologetically nerdy. So are you going to be able to do insert college, Purdue level work, or, whatever school you're applying to, Berkeley level work? Are you nerdy about something? Are you an enthusiast? Do you ask big questions? Are you able to think critically? And oftentimes, these are going to show up in some of the activities that you've done. Maybe you've done a research project, or maybe you had a really cool internship and you were got nerdy with that. Also, obviously, in your grades. If you've got awesome grades, then that shows, hey, I'm somebody who's academically inclined, as it were. But sometimes it's going to come through in your recommendation letters with the way your teachers talk about you. Sometimes in your essays, which we'll get into in just a few minutes here. And if you don't have this, they might wonder, can this student go deeper? Can they critically think? Are they going to be able to really make it in the classroom? So question for yourself right now, if you've already been working on an application, am I demonstrating intellectual curiosity in a clear way? Probably in a number of places in your application. So stay tuned. I'll share with you some examples in just a bit. Next, service to others. Do you go beyond your own sphere, your own brain, your own heart? And do you get out there? We call this compassion in action. Are you an advocate? Do you work to change the things in the world that you feel need changing? Are you trying to solve problems? Now, in many cases, if you look in the activities list, those volunteer activities are going to be a great way to show your commitment to service, the hours you put in, the impact that you've made. But sometimes it'll come through in your rec letters. Okay, your rec letters, your rec letters from your teachers are going to be based on stuff you've done inside the class. Your rec letters, your recommendation letters from your counselor, or letter, I should say, if you've got one, is going to maybe talk about who you are outside the classroom, who you are in the community. And that's an opportunity, one more opportunity for at least your counselor to talk about who you are outside the classroom. And then we've got essays, which we'll get into, like I said, in a few minutes, but also your additional information section. That section of your application that's like 650 words, you can kind of say whatever you want. That's a great place to expand just a little bit on some of that service work that you've done. And here's a good question. The reader may be wondering, are there particular causes or global issues that you want to work for? The reader might also wonder, what are the bigger problems, the bigger issues that what are the bigger issues that the student might want to focus on? So that's something to think about too. So second question to ask yourself, am I showing service to others? What are the big questions that I'd like to be focusing on? I just slip in a New Zealand accent. What are the big questions? So that's the second one. First one, intellectual curiosity. Second one, service to others. Next, leadership, or if you like, initiative. And I like to call this curiosity with legs. There's a weird image in my book, in College Admission Essentials, of the word curiosity with literally having legs. Where do you take the initiative? Where do you start things? Where are you proactive? Are you bold? Are you a catalyst? Like I said, somebody who starts things. Or are you the synthesizer? Are you the one who's like, okay, other people come to you with ideas and you kind of basically weave them together? How could you show this? Through your activities list, through your essays, through your additional information section. So just to give you another example, in your additional information section, it could be that that's blank currently, which is fine. And students get into awesome colleges every year without putting anything in their additional info. But if you feel like, I feel like my leadership in my application is a little bit more weak, and you look at your activities list and you're like, yeah, I do think I'm showing leadership, but my activities could be maybe described in a way that shows my leadership a little more. First of all, tweak your activities list descriptions. But second, it could be that there's some little inclusion in your additional info section that just highlights your leadership. If you're applying to the University of California schools, which are due like Monday, basically, it's a few days. I think they scooted the deadline to Monday, or maybe it's Tuesday. Anyway, you can look it up on their website. Are you using that UC1, that first prompt, to demonstrate leadership? What waves will the student make on campus? The reader wonders. How are they going to take advantage of our resources? So just to recap, we've got intellectual curiosity, service to others, leadership or initiative. And we've got collaboration. So sometimes I'll look at an application and I'll see the student it's like, this student seems really smart, really strong academically. They do great research, but sometimes they feel a little bit like a lone wolf, which is to say, and I oftentimes will look at the application, I'm like, it feels great, but I'm like, something's missing. I'm like, is it collaboration? And oftentimes it is. Who are you in community? Who are you when you're working with others? So another question to ask yourself when you look at your application, can the reader see from basically the materials I've submitted who I am when I'm working with others? If you can include, I would say, 2 moments in your essays where we see you as a collaborator, it just shows them, yeah, you're going to come in and you're going to be able to, harmonize, work with others. And again, it could come through the activities list. This is another one that could come through in your rec letters. It could be that your teacher or your counselor has mentioned something. I love that. You love the background here with this food. And then in the additional information section, I would say this is one that almost certainly is going to be like an essays opportunity in either your personal statement or your supplementals. Stay tuned for examples. And without this, the reader might wonder, is this student a lone wolf? Do they really get how important it is to bring in other perspectives? Next one, consistent engagement. So this is like, staying the course. Have you been involved in certain things? And by the way, if you're applying right now, there's not much you can do about this. But if you're, the parent of a 9th or 10th grader, do we see that you've been involved in something over the course of a couple of years? How are you the backbone? The one who's sort of, keeping things on course. And also there are things that you've been developing, yourself and developing in, over the course of a couple of years. Now, this is, I think, is certainly going to come through in the activities list. When you see those activities that have been like, you spent 2 or 3 years in them, It's not just, the volunteer experiences that were like 1 week, but it's like, okay, over the course of a couple years, I've been involved in this. Can they stick things out through the long haul? Consistent engagement. And that's it. Just to recap these real quick. These are 5 qualities that I would say look for in your application. Intellectual curiosity. Are you nerdy somewhere in the application? Do you help others? Do you show leadership or initiative? And it doesn't have to be that you're president of something, although it could be. Initiative. Where have you taken initiative? Where have you started something on a particular project, maybe? Collaboration. How do you work with others? And consistent engagement. Are there certain activities that you've been involved with for a couple years, not just all one-offs? Someone's asking, what's the difference between curiosity and leadership? I mean, I think one can lead to the other. And, certainly they overlap. I want a leader who's curious. I think when I'm talking about intellectual curiosity, I'm talking about how are you a nerd? In other words, what are the particular areas that you've dived deep on? Whether it's, I don't know, higher level math or history or, I don't know, cooking. And that to me shows you could show curiosity without necessarily showing leadership. So I'd say leadership is oftentimes when you're involving others. What do I recommend to write in the additional info section? I might say a little bit more about that at the end. I'm going to leave that question, Avril, right now for a few minutes. I'll try to get to that at the end. I'll have some tips on that. Okay, so those are some of the qualities that colleges are looking for. Wouldn't it be nice to see an actual application where these are showing up? I think so. Let's take a look. Here's a little screen share where I'm going to walk you through it. This is a student that I worked with a few years ago, applying early to Johns Hopkins. And just a reminder, here are some of those qualities. And this is what we're going to be looking for. And if we had I don't know, it's too many. We can't put 175 people, 176 on a Google Doc. But if the sort of ideal way to do this would be like, I'm going to read through this application and I want you to highlight these. But instead, I just want you to do it in your mind. Where do you see these things? Intellectual curiosity, service to others, leadership initiative, collaboration, and consistent engagement. All right. So this student, again, was applying to Hopkins. I'm going to call this student the scientist because that's what they were primarily interested in. Had a pretty good GPA, 99 out of 100, not just pretty good, really good. Had a 1560 SAT, so like really crushed it. And this was before the big test optional movement, so the student submitted it. And also took some SAT 2s, did great on those. So my point here in sharing you these numbers is that the GPA and the SAT was locked in. It was on point. This wasn't a student that like wrote their way in, although the essays I think did help. This was a student who already had the grades and test scores. And if you're wondering, can you, have all C's and get into Johns Hopkins? Probably not. Okay. Here are some of the extracurricular activities. The student was a producer, coordinator, and camera operator for school media productions. Cool. And they had done this for a few years. So this was something that they had sort of moved up and around in. So this is an example of consistent engagement. Was a member of the rock climbing team and had done this for 2 years. Was the editor for the school yearbook and had also moved up. So the first 3 activities were things that the student had done over the course of a couple of years. And you don't see the stats here, but I just know from working with them. Translator and graphic designer, had created a Marvel translation group. So that shows a little bit of initiative, had like started something. Club leader for the anime club. Also, there's leadership, initiative. President of National Honor Society. Okay, so there's another one where it's like the student has basically done some good work to take initiative and start something when they saw that there was a need. Volunteering for a wider circle. So here's service to others. Volunteering in a particular race and a Thanksgiving pie bake. Now, these 2 were like one-offs. So these weren't instances where necessarily the student was, showing that the consistent engagement, but it does show service to others. And then was a tutor, which also shows service to others. So these last 4 are all hinting at service to others. Quick pause, making sure, Jasmine, I think my video is pinned. If not, would you mind pinning it? That would be great, just making sure. Okay, so what I'm going to actually do, now normally with essays, I look at the personal statement first. I want to actually look at the supplemental essay first. One, to just kind of switch it up in case you've been on these webinars before, but also because I think sometimes for certain schools, and I can't answer this for Hopkins, but for certain schools, the supplemental essays are going to matter just a little, even more than the personal statement. Now, why is this? Well, when you're applying via the Common App, and Johns Hopkins is on the Common App, they don't get to pick what the personal statement is. They're that's what they're given. So when you see those supplemental essays, oftentimes those are pointed at a particular something that the college is looking for. And they're usually connected to their what are called institutional priorities, which is to say the specific things that they're looking for. Now, heads up, the prompt that we're going to look at here is a past prompt. So don't use this one for the current Hopkins prompt. But this was at the time pointing to something that they were looking for. So let's take a look at this Hopkins supplement. And I want you to, again, see if you can find some of these nutrients popping through. Because this student accepted, was, applied early and was accepted early. Okay. By the way, here's the current prompt for Johns Hopkins on the side here. Okay. So the prompt was, successful students at Hopkins make the biggest impact. I'm going to highlight some keywords here. Impact by collaborating with others, including peers, mentors, and professors. Talk about a time in or outside the classroom when you worked with others and what you learned from the experience. Okay, so this one is very collaboration focused. Okay, now I think, side note, and I mentioned this already, it's a good idea to show collaboration, even if they don't ask for it, even if you show it in like 2 sentences. But let's take a look at what the student did. Quote, right. So now we know that either 22.5% nor 25% compressive strains work for the MOS2 response. Then keep it 20% and run the lattice constant group. Yes, this was 2 summers ago when I worked with a small team in the NGRD summer camp to investigate potential hetero-bilayer materials for making more efficient solar cells through ABI-NIT. Okay, there's a little geeky language in there, which is what I call that, which is showing some of that intellectual curiosity. Here's a student who's done some higher level research work and is already hinting at working with others. Cool. Over the course of the research, my partner Lulu and I encountered a range of challenges, including choosing which material to investigate, learning about its molecular structure on a quantum level, which was new to us both, and teaching ourselves programming knowledge, such as using LaTeX. My partner and I worked closely together. Great. Okay, collaboration. Here we go. Meeting online every day or in nearby libraries to exchange our ideas and discoveries. She had more programming experience, so she taught me the basics of the C language. Nice. Willingness to learn from others. While I explained the basic elements of the solar cells to her. Great. Intellectual curiosity. The student knows about solar cells. The daily presentations in class also helped us learn from other classmates. We learned, for example, how to use XCRYSDEN to construct our molecules for solar cells from a group studying Alzheimer's disease. So, and then there's also like group learning. We are able to learn from others. Nice. In the end, the results turn out to be promising, as the theoretical calculations show that graphene/WS2 hetero-bilayers are relatively optimal for photovoltaic applications due to their tunable band gaps when compressive strains are applied. Results we couldn't have achieved alone. Now, you could argue that the student could maybe dial back some of the geeky language because, one, the reader's probably not going to be like me and be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But having a little bit of this sprinkled in, I think can be nice. What I mostly want to learn is, what did you learn from this collaboration? So take a look. This collaboration also taught me accountability. Ooh, new value, nice. We each researched distinct yet similar materials and performed a combined analysis. Thus, if one of us did not perform the calculation processes correctly, we could not compare, understand, and analyze the different properties of the materials. Okay, value in working with somebody else. With our powers combined, we are Captain Planet. No, with our powers combined, we learn more than if we work on our own. In the future, here, I'm going to scoot this down. I'm interested in potentially improving the structure of the material my partner and I researched. At Hopkins, I'd be interested in working and collaborating with this particular professor, Dr. Chao Wang, who has profound knowledge in nanomaterials, as well as students in the science departments to increase the reactivity of the materials. Moreover, I'd love to work with the Sustainability Leadership Council and the Office of Sustainability to help Hopkins move one step closer to reducing carbon emissions by 51% by 2025. Cool. You can tell the student did a little research. This was something that was in the basically the 5-year plan. They wanted to reduce their carbon emissions. So the student hints, hey, I did my research, and here's how I might contribute to your campus, even though they didn't necessarily ask for it. And I kind of like that. Sometimes the student will say, or the school will say specifically like, yo, how are you going to contribute to our campus? And sometimes they're just going to kind of like leave it open. Even if they just leave it open, don't make it like a whole why us. Like, answer the question, how have you collaborated with others? She does that. But once she's answered the question, then maybe you work in a little bit of like, and here's how I'd contribute. So this is a little mini why us here. And it's not super long. It's like, a couple sentences. An end to climate change may be in our reach if we work open-mindedly, efficiently, and collaboratively. Cool. And she's hinting, hey, I've got these qualities, open-mindedness, efficiency, because we're working together collaboratively. So pretty nice. And as you can see of the qualities, we see a little intellectual curiosity. We see a little collaboration, obviously. Do we see initiative? Is there initiative in here? Maybe. I mean, it's sort of implied. This could have come through more clearly, where that the student was like taking initiative, and that would be a potential tweak to this essay. Um, but I also see service to others implied, which is nice, with the end here. We're talking about climate change and reducing carbon emissions. That to me is like this is all in the service of helping others. So this is a pretty nice one where we're getting a little bit on a lot of these things. Consistent engagement. When I say consistent engagement, is it something that the student is, doing over 2 to 3 years? Maybe not necessarily, but what I like is that the student is really showing that they've been involved, at least here for the course of the summer, which is great. All right, let's take a look at the additional information section, and we'll get to the personal statement here in just a minute. Hi, Tom. Welcome. Good to see you. All right. So in the additional info section, what the student did at the start, and you don't have to do this, and this kind of answers one of the questions that came through, is this the student basically talked about right at the start here, what is the research that she was working on? And she said the research paper, which she put the title in, is published by, and then she put in who published it, and then she actually linked to the research paper. Now, students will often ask, are they going to click on this? I don't know. Maybe, depends on how much time they have. You could assume that they're not going to, okay? Like the important stuff that you really want to put them to read, like it's like when you send an email to somebody, like put it in the email, put it in the body of the email. This is kind of the body of the email here. If you really are wondering if they're going to read it or not, put it here, okay? If you're like, but it doesn't hurt to be like, hey, yo, it's an actual paper. And if you want to check it out, you can. She adds, I'm also currently taking a college level online linear algebra class organized by Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth. It's not on the official transcript because the class isn't considered an official course in my high school. The grade will be available by the end of the year, possibly earlier. More information will be sent then. Great, super straightforward, super fine. Besides the academic courses listed on the transcript, I'm also passionate about photography and traveling. My past works are posted here. Again, don't have to do this, but if you've got a link and you want to share it, sweet, go for it. Why not? And some people might ask, is this okay? And yes, this is totally fine. If you want, you could add little headings for these. You could just go research, and here you could add, Hopkins course, and here you could add, photography. And what that does is for the reader who's skimming and they're like, wait, what's going on here? Is this all the same thing? They go, oh, research, Hopkins course, photography. Got it. Okay. And then they can sort of look. So adding these little subheadings can be a nice little inclusion for the additional info. And that's me kind of answering the student who, Avril, the question you asked about what do you put in the additional info. Stuff like this can be useful. Awards. This is for the awards section. Was awarded an excellence in math and science, outstanding scholarship, which was given for research, a dance award, a leadership award. Great. There's another points for leadership. Love it. And then a Scholastic Science Fair prize, which again shows that intellectual curiosity. So we can kind of see here that the student is kind of checking these boxes multiple times. Like we see intellectual curiosity through the personal statement, through some of the things that are, some of the activities, and we're seeing it in the supplemental essay and even in the awards. So I'm like, check, 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 check. If I'm a Hopkins reader, and the student also, by the way, is able to like bring it in terms of grades and test scores, I'm like, yeah, this is making sense why this student would excel on our campus. Service to others, again, it's coming through in the activities list. Leadership or initiative is coming through in the activities list. So let's take a look at the personal statement. This is my favorite part, as many of y'all know. So this is I want to show you the first draft, and because it changed a lot from first to final. So here we go. Using pens, she begins, was a privilege for me. Now, by the way, this is a student who worked on what's called the essence objects exercise, which is an exercise that we do, at College Essay Guy. It's about finding specific objects that connect to different sides of you. And this is kind of the inspiration for this first draft. Using pens, she writes, was a privilege for me. 10 years ago, when I first entered third grade, I wasn't allowed to use pens. Teachers believe that second graders cannot handle the pens and inks with their small hands. It was a ceremony for me when the teacher told us that we were old enough to use pens. Now, at this point, I'm kind of wondering, wait, what is this? Where is this essay going? There's kind of like, um, you know, like curiosity for me. Like what's going on? I bought my first pen with excitement and nervousness and started my journey with pens. And you notice the word pens is repeating a lot. Look at that. Like if I just search for the word pens, it's coming up a bunch. Being a starter, I frequently get the ink all over the place, but each time I mess up, I learned more about pens and started to use it with confidence. And again, if you think about these qualities that I've been talking about, I'm not really seeing those coming through just yet. With pens, I exchange letters with my mom. Okay, something about family, sharing our thoughts in a calm way. With pens, I record my days, leaving my stories on the paper. I wrote letters to me in the future, envisioning what I will be like. I drew what I saw, making the world alive on my canvas. With pens, I learn and grow. Okay, so there's something that the student is trying to do poetically with pens, repetition. But I think it's a lot to use the word pens, 19 times in the same short first half of the essay. Pens represent a journey in my life, and I collect the memories of my life through refills. Each refill sets a milestone in my life, reminding me of what I've accomplished. Pens also lead me to the future. I wrote letters to myself, imagine the envelopes to be open 10 years from now. I have no idea what my life's going to be like in 10 years. Maybe I'm still a student craving for knowledge. Maybe I'm a traveler, kissing the earth with my own feet. Or maybe I'm a painter creating my little world. The future represents possibilities to me. Okay, so what I like about this is the student is trying to do something a little more creative and trying to basically use these objects to show different sides of themselves. But there's not a lot of there just yet. So we went in and did some brainstorming work, and I'm going to share a little bit about these a little bit later. But we basically evaluated this and thought, I asked her, what do you feel like is essential here? And she's like, my creativity. I was like, okay, I think there's a way to work in creativity to one of your, because she's like, I feel like my science stuff is going to come through my other essays. I want to show my creativity. I was like, okay, let's find a way to get some creativity in there. And so we did a number of brainstorms. And one of the things that the student talked about was collecting. And I thought, ooh, what do you collect? And we got into a conversation about collecting. We'll get into the essay in just a second. She talks about things that could be physically collected, but also things that couldn't be physically collected. And she also was able to work in her science here in a little bit. And I want to show you, I want to analyze, actually, let's go through it piece by piece because I want to analyze the transitions because I think they're really solid. So here it is. Here's the final draft that she ended up submitting. I'm a collector of many things, she writes. When I was young, I lived near the coast of Xiongdao and loved going to the beach with my grandmother to collect the weirdest shells and rocks. I noticed how each rock underwent unique attritions and abrasions. So already she's showing that intellectual curiosity here. And each shell has its own layers of proteins and minerals. Those details record their life stories. As I began to write my own stories, I collected pens. With pens, now the pens come in. And by the way, if some of y'all have questions, feel free to answer those. Tom's going to be he's answering questions here in the chat. So it's kind of like our way of working, combo with one another. So feel free to throw questions into the chat if you like. Those details record their life stories. Ooh, that's kind of nice. As I began to write my own stories, I collected pens. With pens, I wrote letters to my future self, envisioning goals and possibilities. I drew what I observed, bringing the world of colors to life on my canvas. Okay, so here we're starting with this new frame of collecting things. And here, first we talk about collecting shells and rocks, which allows us to see sort of like the sciencey side. And then she talked about collecting pens, which allows us to see her commitment to future growth, personal development, envisioning goals and possibilities. She also notes that she drew what she observed, so she shows a little creativity there. As I grew older, she says, I began to preserve things that couldn't be physically collected. So now we're still kind of keeping on the theme of collecting, but it's a little more abstract. When traveling to Italy in 2010, I found the architecture of the churches fascinating and photographed what I saw. So she's still collecting things. Now she's collecting images. Thousands of years of history and culture could be found in the smallest details of these works of art, from the money bag held by Judas to the laurel crown of Apollo, from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel to the coins in the Trevi Fountain. Italians recorded their age of Renaissance to the Baroque period through artistic lenses. Now, she really wanted to show that she had that interest, that creativity, and so she works it in here. And notice how much she's got in just, how long is this, 250? 191 words. And we've got intellectual curiosity, we've got her sciencey side, we've also got her creative side. That photography, that if she's worried it's not going to show up as much by just putting it in a link in the additional info, cool. Now we see her artistic side. Let's see where she goes. More recently, diving deeper into the scientific world, okay, I've fallen in love with even smaller things. Okay. In 2017, I began exploring the basics of quantum physics through a research opportunity, investigating potential materials for more efficient solar cells. I learned about the first Brillouin, I don't know how to pronounce that, Brillouin zone and crystal structures, and appreciated the complexity of the most basic composition of elements. Inspired by those concepts and theories, I dug more deeply into the world of physics and discovered the world cannot be explained by a single theory. Quantum theories rule the micros, while general relativity explains the universe on a large scale. So, this is again showing that intellectual curiosity, and I love here that she includes what I call a so what moment. Well, this is where she answers, okay, this stuff that I'm talking about that I researched, why does it even matter? And boom, that it's talking about how things can be explained, both on the micro and the macro. So I'm seeing that intellectual vitality, that intellectual curiosity at work here. And notice how that's doing something different. So first paragraph, we've got the collecting, shells and rocks, pens. Then we've got the creative side. Now we're getting more into the research. The reason she wanted to do this, you might be like, well, Ethan, that's going to be in her supplemental essay. Well, she wanted to use this personal statement for multiple schools. So she wanted to make sure that she was mentioning her research, at least briefly. Notice here that this is focusing on a different quality than her supplement. Her supplemental essay, and if you missed that, watch the beginning of the recording, but her supplemental essay is focused on collaboration. This is focused more on intellectual curiosity. Looking away from my small collections in the micro world, I also found the big things fascinating, and they soon became the object of my research. So you see what she's doing? She's going from small to large, but she's keeping the same theme here of research now. Besides learning in physics class, I read books such as The Universe in a Nutshell and The Three-Body Problem, enhancing my understanding of astrophysics with particular interest in dark matter and dark energy. Having the chance to attend a lecture organized by Princeton University, I learned more about the dark side experiments. Starting from the Dark Side 50, researchers at the Gran Sasso Laboratories chased after the weakly interacting massive particles through liquid argon, again, that geeky language, as an efficient scintillator with powerful pulse-shaped distribution and high ionization yield. Liquid argon serves a perfect choice for detecting the WIMPs. Although the WIMPs are not yet detected, the much bigger DarkSide 20K project, along with the new SIPMs as photosensors, would illuminate the path into the unknown universe. So she's kind of, again, moving along that science side, showing she's definitely going to be able to do college level science work, research. Enriching my knowledge of the scientific world, I've discovered that what once seemed to me quite large, such as stars, planets, and black holes, are actually quite small compared to the unknown world. So this is sort of like a so what for the whole essay. What have you learned? The explosion of a supernova may not reach Earth until the extinction of humans. However, when they explode, the basic elements cluster together and form something new. To the universe, the rise and fall of human civilization is just in a blink of an eye. We rose from the dust and will eventually return to the dust. Now, I don't know. You could read that and be like, that's kind of dark. I don't know. I think it's kind of scientific and kind of true. So I kind of see the future scientist's mind at work here. And this is just a beautiful, insightful, like you're not going to read this in anybody else's essay. And when it comes to the ends of your essays, and I would say the ends of your paragraphs, ask yourself, could someone else have written this in their essay? And when I look at this, a sentence, sentences like these, to the universe, the rise and fall of human civilization is just in a blink of an eye. I mean, maybe another student could have written that, but I doubt it. I doubt that that's going to be in someone else's essay applying this year. Here's the ending. On the flip side, what once seemed to me quite small, such as rocks and shells, are in some ways quite large, each representing a captivating universe. There's a surprise twist. Every vein of precipitation on the rock and every layer of pigment of the shell are signs of their growth and change. Yes, this is the scientific mind at work. While every brushstroke of the paintings and every mark of chisel of the sculptures reflect the ideals of their creators. Yes, bringing it back to the start. Observations of those small details and the stories behind them make up vivid worlds. Over the years, I've collected, observed, and explored the worlds of art, history, and science. And the pieces from these different worlds have come together to make me who I am today. Woo! An artist, historian, and scientist. These are the three identities that the student's bringing forth in this essay. Love this, love this, love this. There's so much to love about this essay. Let's just review real quick. Intellectual curiosity, for sure. in not just one field, but three fields. Service to others, mm, not so much. In this application, service to others, really the activities list is carrying the weight here because I don't see a ton of service to others besides the activities list and maybe, again, implied in the supplemental essay with the work on climate change. Leadership or initiative, maybe that could have come through more strongly here. Is there initiative here? I mean, there was initiative in the sense of like, she was taking photos on her own. We don't know if there was initiative when it comes to some of this stuff that she studied. Probably, like, probably no one forced her to attend a lecture, but there could be initiative maybe hinted at just a little bit more. Did she have any leadership responsibilities with her, in the work that she's done, in her activities? Potentially. It's not coming through as clearly right here. So that's a note that I would give. By the way, side note, the student was still accepted. So that's why we call these nutrients. I think it's still a really strong application, even if they're not coming through, 10 out of 10. But again, I think leadership's coming through in terms of the activities and the descriptions, which you're not able to see. Collaboration, yes, check the box hugely on the supplemental essay. And consistent engagement, like I said, it's coming through really clearly on those activities. So to me, this is just a really solid application, top to bottom. She was proud of it. She felt relieved, excited, to submit it, and was like, just feeling pretty good about it when it came to her application submission. So I want to offer you all some tips before so we're going to do Q&A in a little bit, like aloud, and Tom's going to stay answering questions in the chat. Thank you, Tom. And before we get to, I want to give you some tips for how to basically make the most of these next few weeks before application. I'm going to give you some specific resources. Before we do that, I want to give away some free spots in my upcoming boot camp. Let me just give you all one more chance to get those. So if I'll put this in the chat, and then we'll get to, let me just put this in le chat, as they say in French. They don't say that in French. I don't think they do. Here we go. If you fill out this form, we're going to randomly grab 5 folks to get free spots in the boot camp here. Okay. So fill that out. Well, actually, let me just tell you about the boot camp, and this will actually stall and allow you all a chance to fill out that form. Let me show you what the heck this boot camp even is. And I'm only going to take like a minute on this. And here it is. So starting tomorrow, if you're still working on your applications, I'm doing a 2-day boot camp. I'm going to talk to you about what colleges are looking for in a personal statement. How do you know if it's working or if maybe you should potentially start over? I'm going to talk to you about writing an awesome hook, how to finish strong. One of the big values of this is going to be this choose your own adventure essay tool. And I'll put this link in the chat so you can kind of see more about this. But it's going to basically answer a lot of the questions that you'd have when you get in a jam and 3 weeks from now, you're like, I don't know how to add more insight. There's a module on how to add more insight. The pre-work, you're going to have to get started on it tonight, like, get cracking, because this is, like I said, tomorrow. I'm going to take you through tomorrow's focused all on personal statement and brainstorming extra ideas. Even for those of you who've got an essay that you like, I think it's probably going to give you stuff that you can add in more to basically hit on those nutrients, because I'm going to basically focus on some exercises that are going to allow you to go broader. I'll give you in a few minutes some principles to think about if you're like not sure whether or not your personal statement's standing out. And then day 2, which is going to be on Sunday, I'm going to talk to you about the other parts of the application. So I'm going to do a crash course on your activities list, your additional info. I'm going to talk to you about how to save a bunch of time by writing something called super essays. We'll talk about the why us essay, the diversity or community essay. You'll see it here. We definitely have pay what you can spot. So if finances are a barrier for you, please just request a pay what you can spot. We'd love to have you even for $0. There's like a little simple verification there. And $97 is also the cheapest we've ever done for any of these mini courses. But despite that, we're still offering, and I'll put this in the chat again, if you enter code THANKS, you'll get 10% off. So I'll throw that into the chat. And well, probably at the end of the session, just so that y'all have enough time, we'll do a drawing for that. If you're interested, if you've already got an application that you really like, we've got something called the College Application Review. It's our complete application review, and this is headed up by Tom and some awesome reviewers on our team. You want to make sure that you get it in within the next couple weeks, but we do a really thorough job of reviewing and giving tons and tons. We've done a bunch of these, tons and tons of notes. I'll put this in the chat as well, the link to that. This is, yeah, like I said, it's called our complete app review. You can get $100 off if you use this code. I'll put it in the chat for you. Ba-dum-bum-bum. It's you basically use, it's called CAR 100. It's a complete app review. And we'd love to support you in that way. And finally, if you're one of those students who's like, I really need one-on-one help, we've got awesome, coaches standing by, ready to meet like, ASAP. And let me just put this. I think this will work. No, that's a weird link, but anyway, that'll get you there. And it's basically like whatever sessions you need, kind of, to just get things rolling. It's ASAP. And we've got an awesome team. We've got a process that basically we quick look at what you've got. We do a quick assessment to see, okay, do we stick with this or do we, revamp? Do we work on different things? We work on all the different written parts of the application. And yeah, you can learn more there. All commercial over. All right. Let me give you some tips before we get to more Q&A on how do you actually know if your application is like, first of all, let me give you two resources actually that are just going to make things a lot easier on you. One is organizing yourself with something called the essay tracker, and I'll link to this in the chat. The essay tracker is a really simple spreadsheet that basically involves putting everything onto one doc like this. So you've got your, wild card schools, less than 10% chance, your reach, your maybe, and your likelies. And I would just say basically go broadly speaking, likelies are like you've got a 60% chance or better. Maybes are kind of in that middle range of like, 20 to 50%. And reaches are probably like less than 20% chance of acceptance. And then here on the next tab, Essay Tracker, you basically jump in and enter all of the different prompts that you need to write for all the schools you're applying to. Once you do that, you're going to be able to see the work, all the stuff at hand. You can put in what the completion dates and then the actual dates. And then the other thing I want to offer you is there's this really simple template that one of my coaches put together for students who are working on that, with a short timeline. And you can basically map out for yourself, what are the days you're going to be working? What are the things that you hope to finish by when? And then underneath, you can kind of give yourself action items. This is also a sneak peek at something that I'm doing a course for counselors. And this is one resource that I talk about in there about helping students finish. So counselors, if you're watching, I'll put this in the link in the chat. But this is a simple resource that you can use. What's cool about this too is you can just like, cross off the things as they go like this. So this is a really simple and useful thing, students, for just keeping yourself organized. So essay tracker and then the template, I'll throw this into the chat. And I'll say this, for those of you who are trying to decide, should I keep my personal statement topic or not? When I'm looking at an essay, or when somebody that I work with is looking at an essay, the qualities that we're looking for are these. When we're thinking about, okay, is this topic going to really work? What we're looking for is, first of all, is this topic somewhat insightful? Which is to say, is it revealing information about you that isn't obvious from elsewhere in the application? So with the example that we just gave, this student's love of science was probably pretty clear from the supplemental essay, the activities. What I may not have gotten as much information on was this student's love of and commitment to and interest in art and history. So that really brought in some insights about how that student's brain works in different fields. I really love that. So number one, is it insightful? Is it revealing information that's not obvious from elsewhere? Number two, is your topic elastic? In other words, is it stretchy enough to talk about lots of different sides of you, your skills, your qualities, your values, your interests? Sometimes students choose, like, I want to talk about this one robotics competition. And it's like, oh, I mean, yay that you did robotics, but when you're focused on an extracurricular activity or like a specific competition, like a hackathon, I really just get to see you in this one scenario. And it oftentimes ends up being kind of narrow. For students like that, I'll often go, could you put that in a paragraph? And are there other sides of you that you could show? That would be really awesome. So if you're writing about an extracurricular activity, I want to encourage you to consider a more elastic topic, something that could show lots of different sides of you. And the third one, and this is related to that, is I want to encourage you to consider topics that are uncommon, which is to say not a common sport or a common extracurricular or a common, club or activity. If you're writing about, let's say dance, there are going to be so many dance essays. So you really want to make efforts to make, I don't know, again, take dance and make it one part, or like, what is the essential thing that you that you want to express about dance, can you express that more briefly, more succinctly, and then show other sides of yourself in that application? Because I really think there's an opportunity in 650 words to go beyond sort of like the narrow activity that is probably somewhat common. So the three qualities that I would say, if you've written a draft, go, is my essay insightful? Is my topic elastic? And is it somewhat uncommon? Or am I doing a really uncommon treatment if the topic is common? So those are some things to think about. Okay, in a few minutes here, we'll do the drawing for this. Let's see, for students who've filled out that questionnaire, that form. Let me just refresh my form here behind the scenes and make sure that I've got a view on everybody, so I can hopefully do this live. That'll kind of be more fun, more exciting. And let's see. Ooh, there's so many to scroll down through because we've used this form a bunch. Let's see, scrolling down, scrolling down. There we go. Cool. Okay, a bunch of y'all have filled it out. Awesome. It's not too late. If you want to join for the boot camp, you can still fill out the form. So you'll find that link in the chat. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes, which is perfect. I'd love to shift to Q&A. And Tom, what's been happening in Q&Asville? What are anything you want to highlight that folks maybe like that might apply to a bunch of students?
Yeah, so thank you, Ethan, and thank you everyone for sending in questions. I'm so sorry to be tuning in. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I mixed up the webinar times and I hopped into a restaurant to log on to their hotspot. So thank you to Cook's Lobster House in Bailey Island, Maine, where there's no cell service. So a couple of questions that were coming up in the Q&A that are, I'd say, helpful to those of you tuning in there were two questions in particular. I think a couple of people were wondering the additional information section, should and how I use it. Do I need to use it? You do not need to use it. That's something that I think, this can be a great place. And we have a blog guide that I'll share in the chat right now, just so that way those of you who are thinking about using your additional info section can have a little bit more do's and don'ts to refer back to after this webinar. But basically, I would say, so my background, for those of you who haven't met me, is prior to working at College Essay Guy, I worked in college admissions for a total of 6 years at two selective colleges, Holy Cross and Pomona College. So I've read thousands of college applications during my time in higher ed. And I would say, at places like Pomona College, which had a less than 10% acceptance rate, maybe about like 30% of the applications I was reading had anything included in their additional information section. It's often left blank by a lot of students because it's completely optional. And many students use it as a place to explain extenuating circumstances like dips in grades that are a real big anomaly from your typical high school trajectory. So if you had an illness, if you had a really challenging personal experience, family dynamics, whatnot, that would be definitely a place where that section would be helpful. Sometimes students use it as elaborations for, real big areas of initiative and leadership, those admission nutrients that Ethan described. That can often be a place to kind of give a little more time in the sun to your babies. Any of those big extracurricular achievements that were like the 150 character description does not even, come close to, capturing the gravitas here. So again, no requirement to use it, completely optional, but those I'd say are just a few of the examples of where it can be helpful. There were also lots of questions that students were asking about whether or not they submit their test scores to colleges that are test optional. So I don't believe this was probably a theme of this webinar particularly, but I understand it's probably something that's really top of mind for you. And so my kind of blanket piece of advice that I just want to share with you, if you are wondering whether or not you should submit your test scores to a college that's on your list that is test optional, is if you are at or above the middle 50% of posted test score ranges for a school, it's probably a good idea to submit your scores because it shows consistency among their admitted student profile that you are in line with that particular piece of their application process. You do not need to submit your scores if you are below that range. And there are some exceptions, and many colleges such as Dartmouth, other schools have come forward and sent forward press releases talking about how in some situations, say you come from a high school or an area where your scores might be below a school's middle 50% ranges, but it's the highest score that many students in your graduating class have received. And if you look at something like your school profile, you notice that basically your score is anomalous within your local context. That can be a really specific and granular question to ask yourself that lots of students and families stress over and wrestle with. And so our biggest piece of advice is rather than asking them on questions like that on webinars like this, where Ethan or myself don't really have a chance to get to know you. We don't really, well, we'd like to, but just given, there's 164 of you, and we're not really able to kind of get the full picture of where you come from, your background, your access to preparing for standardized tests. Those are things that people in college admissions really think a lot about and really evaluate into their decision on how to evaluate a student's score. So the best advice I can give you is to talk to your school-based counselor or try to get in contact with someone who knows a little bit more about your local situation, because otherwise we can give general blanket advice about what I said about think about that middle 50% range, but there's more nuanced advice that will come based on your own situation. So those were two big themes in the questions.
Yeah, good advice. Someone asked, can you do a session with examples for students who have good but not outstanding stats? And what I want to say to you, dear friends, is the advice that I'm giving you is still going to apply no matter what whether you have an A average, a B average, a B minus average. Like these things, these nutrients are still going to apply. Now, it might look like when I look at this application, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so impressive. I don't have such amazing internships or research opportunities. That's okay. I still want you to consider, where are you showing your intellectual curiosity? And how can you use specific details to make those things that you have been focused on, make those pop? Okay. So for, service to others, that's still going to want to manifest that in your application. You're still going to want to bring in things like collaboration. So these are like sort of, what do I want to say? They apply to, students no matter what now I could show you an essay that's like less good, and like we could learn stuff from that, but I just find that there's so much more to learn from like, awesomely written example essays. So that's why I focus on that. Let's see. Is mentioning a faculty professor who you're interested in doing research with in your essay a good idea? What's your opinion, Ethan? Yeah, I mean, especially in that YS essay, if there's a particular, like you saw in the supplemental, if they're asking for how will you make use of the school's resources, absolutely. In fact, do the research and see if you can learn something from that professor, and then talk about the specific thing that you learned, the specific thing that's like, and keep it short, a couple sentences. But if you can keep it focused on the things that you really are interested, like the problems that you're interested in, I think that's a great way to demonstrate you've done your research and that you're going to be somebody who's going to take advantage of the resources at school.
There was a link
Yeah,
that I
go.
think that you have shared, Ethan, that had I think there was some permission restrictions in the Google Doc.
My
So I
bad.
just shared a forced copy version in the chat. So if someone can let me know if that works okay, that would be great. But
Awesome.
hopefully that works okay now.
Appreciate it. I'll do one more and then Tom, I'll let you pick one. Let's see. What do you suggest, says Casey. Hi, Casey. For a student who shows multiple sides of themselves but doesn't connect them or doesn't have a cohesive theme? I think it's fine. I mean, arguably, this essay student that I just looked at doesn't have a cohesive theme. Like I don't know that necessarily I look at this application and be like, oh, this student is, I mean, I clearly see the student's interested in science, but that's just because, she's repeated science a few times. So I would say just showing those different sides of yourself is a great way to go. In this case, she was the essay, if you look at it, it's kind of like, wait, she's talking about collecting things and now she's talking about art and now she's talking about this. If you can name the 2 or 3 areas of interest at the end of the essay, I think that's a pretty good way to make it feel more cohesive. This is especially true, I'd say, for those of you students out there who don't have a particular major that you're interested in. You're like, oh, I'm undecided. I don't know. It's fine to be undecided. I think just naming 2 or 3 areas of interest, totally cool. And you can do that in your supplemental essay, or you can do that in the personal statement. Tom, you want to grab one and answer aloud, or are you preferring this typing action style?
No, I can definitely find one to answer aloud on a 4.0 GPA scale. Okay. Let's see. One of them is how can you create your application strategy? Dump your whole story onto the doc and how different aspects of the application weave together, or should you just write the supplements without overthinking? This is a great question. So I think in terms of application strategy, my biggest piece of advice is to use the different components in your application strategically to ideally highlight different sides of yourself that didn't get as much airtime in other places of your app. So for example, maybe you're really interested in a particular academic subject and major, and that happened to be a big theme of your personal statement. Perhaps you're applying to some colleges that have supplemental essays where you can talk about intellectual experiences, you may not want to exactly use the same specific examples and small moments that you highlighted of here are the formative things that really got me into engineering. You may want to use different experiences that continue to bolster your, interest in engineering in something like the supplemental essays. In terms of the overthinking question, I'm really glad you brought this up because I want to reiterate, as a former admission reader, that the scrutiny that you are placing on yourself is nowhere even close to the 10 minutes or less oftentimes than an admission officer or two admissions officers reading your file at the same time have to keep. That's the lens that they have to read your application through. They're not looking at it like a test where you start with 100 points and they're docking you for, I didn't like this essay topic, minus 10 points, or, oh, slight repetition of, engineering interest, minus 6. That's really not the way that admissions officers grade applications. In fact, what they're doing is you're kind of starting from zero, and they're assigning typically, as they read through your file, there's usually kind of different like points and rubrics that they're adding to your file as they notice things that are really attractive to them and to the institutions that they represent based on priorities that are in play there, or areas that they're kind of really looking for in terms of valued qualities in their students. So we feel as if, based on our research and our assessment of lots of different colleges and universities, that the admission nutrients that Ethan shared at the beginning of this webinar are great ways to anchor your application and to think about what key experiences specifically can I fold into my writing that can help illustrate these nutrients collectively. You may not have all of them, right? That's not a requirement. You have to have all 5 of these things to be admitted to a college. Absolutely not. That is not what we're saying. But what we're saying is that they can be a helpful guiding force for you if you are wrestling over, I have all these different experiences and I don't know what to put where, and I'm feeling very overwhelmed. I'd say the nutrients can be a very grounding way to kind of give your application a little more strategy, and to have that kind of inner filter in your head in terms of thinking like an admission officer, because those are the types of questions and qualities that they are going to be looking for in your writing through your experiences throughout high school.
Yeah, great point. I want an analogy that sometimes I'll use is like, ask yourself, and this is like, I don't know who said this, Newt Gingrich or somebody, are you hunting antelope or field mice? And what I mean by this is like, there are going to be some big opportunities for changes, antelope. And then oftentimes though, we see students focus on like word changes and like, should I change this or this? And it's like field mice. And what you want to do is you want to kind of zoom back and go, for example, are these 5 qualities in a big way in my application? If not, this could be an opportunity, for instance, to reconsider your personal statement topic. Sometimes those personal statements are focused on just some small aspect of students. In fact, that's the case a lot of times. And you might want to zoom back and go, okay, how could I find a topic that's going to be, basically, you've got time, you've got a month right now, if you're applying regular decision, to basically make some edits to that, and or start over with a new topic, because a month is plenty of time to write a new personal statement and go, could I find a personal statement topic that's going to show more of who I am? To answer the question of somebody in the chat, to improve your application if you get deferred. If you get deferred, it's a sign of a couple things. One, you probably want to expand your list of colleges, because it's probably that, and probably you applied somewhere selective, which is good. That's a sign that you're, aiming high. But also, you want to make sure that you've got enough colleges on your list that you can get into and that you're excited about. Now is a great time to add those schools to your list. Okay, not 30, but have 3 to 5 of each. Schools you can definitely get into, and then schools maybe you can get into. But in terms of improving your application, one of the big things you can do is consider, what are the different topics that I could focus on in my personal statement and my supplemental essays that are really going to help me stand out. To the person who's asking, and by the way, in a second, we're going to give away those 5 spots in the boot camp. How do I know how to reuse material? Is it a good idea? Definitely a good idea to potentially reuse material to save yourself time so that you can focus on fewer essays. This is what I'm going to get into in the boot camp. Focus on writing fewer essays really well that you're reusing. But the short answer to this is brainstorming content that's going to overlap with the prompts before you even write it. So in other words, put those prompts at the top of your doc, whatever prompts can potentially overlap, and then go, okay, what is the content that I can write? What are the bullet points that I can focus on that are going to work for each one of those prompts? And so it's kind of like zooming back to the planning stage, even if you've written a draft, to see, what could potentially work for those multiple prompts. That's kind of a short answer, forgive me. Okay, we're doing this boot camp and we're giving away 5 spots right now. Just a reminder, it's pay what you can. So if you don't get a free spot, don't worry. You can, if you're a low-income student, still get a free spot. So, all right. So the winners are Benjamin Atabra. Give me a little shout, Benjamin, in the Q&A if you're here. Hopefully you're here. Don't have to be present to win. We'll email you. Raquel Flores, and I just randomly picked names. I just skipped down. Dean Collier, you are the next contestant on I'll See You at the Boot Camp tomorrow. Katya Tumanova, congratulations. And Justin Kipkamoy, congratulations. So all of y'all, you'll get emails with a link to sign up. And congrats. I'm glad you are here and glad you won. And for those of you who didn't win, don't worry, you can still join and there's no financial barrier. So I'll answer tons more questions tomorrow. If we didn't get to your question, sorry, we had 150 folks, but you're welcome. I'm so glad you were here. And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. And if you're a counselor, thanks for joining us. And parents, hope you have a beautiful weekend. We'll stay for like another, like, I don't know, minute or two. Tom and I we do like to kind of stay after class here to like answer a couple more questions. So
Office hours.
Office hours. But Tom, we do have to let Tom go because, hey, it's a holiday. And so we're going to answer like one or two more questions each. Yeah, if you have any sort of last minute burning questions, we'll see. Actually, we're probably not going to be able to take new questions. We'll probably just answer questions that have already been answered. But I hope to see some of y'all on the boot camp, and I'll put in all the links once more.
Would you like me to pause the recording? Well, if we step into this next Q&A phase, or
You know what? Yeah, let's do that. We'll